So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Jim Cowan. I'm the Director of Course Rating and Handicapping for the NCGA, and I'd like to welcome you to Part 1 of USGA Tournament Management Training. Those who know me best know that I tend to talk way too much. In that regard, you are in a little bit better shape than our earlier seminars. I had a long preamble for the first one. Shorten that for the second, and shortening this one even further. I have to start off with some apologies. This rollout is not going at all as we had intended. We had intended to have the accounts and your access established a couple of weeks ago so that you could dabble with the program before you came to some training, and circumstances have just conspired against us to prevent that from happening. We presented our list, all the accounts we wanted set up and in what manner we wanted them set up more than a month ago to GHIN, who must screen them and then send them on to Golf Genius. And we just keep on coming back to square one on a number of matters. So at this point in time, I can't tell you exactly when the account is going to be established, whether that's a matter of days, next week, the week after. We're doing everything we can to expedite the process. And one thing we're going to do is those who are sitting in on these webinars, your accounts are going to be set up first. So that's one thing that we can tell you. But again, right now, we simply don't know the date. The other thing I want to discuss a little bit is just some of the challenges going on right now, not only in terms of introducing a new tournament management program. GHIN intends to come out with a whole new platform. As recently as mid-December, we were under the impression that all those new products were going to be released January 1st. We were going to do all sorts of live seminars and webinars in November and December to introduce all these new products. And again, in mid to late September, all of a sudden, we were told, oops, we're not going to be able to deliver on that timeline. So it's been very frustrating, to say the least. It's also interesting, the dynamic of those of you who are tuning in. We have a lot of big clubs, some small clubs, regular clubs, associate clubs, private clubs represented, public, number of SIRS branches. So it's very diverse. You know, in some of those small clubs, all they want is something simple that works, that's going to do scorecards and dot the strokes, that'll compute skins and allow you to post scores. Some other clubs have very sophisticated needs. Perhaps they do a lot of outside events. They want to dazzle the people that come and play in their tournaments. They have plotter printers that are color plotter printers that can do dazzling, want to do dazzling scoreboards. They want leaderboards placed on TVs. This program can handle both sets of needs. Now, early on, for those who have very simple needs, you might be looking at some of the screens and go, well, that doesn't look too simple. But there are some features in it that are going to allow you to replicate tournaments that you've run before, replicate formats that you've run before, that make the second time around very, very simple. There is a feature that I'm especially looking forward to that's going to be released about a month from now. It's a quick event setup, where instead of navigating many, many pages in order to set up your event and ultimately your rounds and your tournaments, it's going to be very concise in just in one page. So that's going to be a great, allow you to save a lot of time. So some of those features are going to be coming up soon. So we're going to be repeating some of these seminars. We're recording them. We're going to make them available. And then as the weeks go on, we will focus more laser-like on some smaller topics like teams, like multi-day events, so that you can tune in and learn more. And when we get that quick event feature going too, we especially want to show you that Golf Genius estimates that 75% of the tournaments that were run across the country using this platform were single-day events, and that's what the quick event feature is designed for. I got to tell you one thing. I'm in the exact same boat that all of you are. All I've ever known is TPP. So I'm learning as we go, as you will be. And we actually resisted the temptation to have a Golf Genius rep perform these first few webinars that, they know every detail of it. And from that standpoint, it would have been great. But again, I'm in your shoes, so I can relate to some of the struggles you may have. Some of the areas where I've been challenged in trying to learn a new progression, a new logic of a program, and maybe I can pass some of those tips on to you. In speaking with our colleagues across the country that released this platform last year, they indicate that if you never use TPP at all, you might be in a better boat than those who did, because it's ingrained in you how TPP worked, the order that you did things, and in effect, you have to forget that and learn a new program. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Golf Genius does extensive surveying, and what they find is there's some nervous excitement at first because there's this big, brand new, shiny program available to them, and then the reality of having to learn the programs sinks in, and maybe the evaluations come down a little bit, but after a few months, they go high, and certainly people are very high across the country on the program now that they had a season under their belt. So what I'm going to ask you to do today is try to look beyond some of the bells and whistles, and like me, try to focus on the order, the progression of the steps, and the logic of the program and how it goes from point A to point B, so that you start learning the innards of the program that way. Start realizing, okay, the next step is going to be this, and that. So part one is going to be big picture, an overview, a walkthrough of many of the features. It's just a PowerPoint presentation. Tomorrow is going to be a live demonstration setting up a tournament from start to finish. So let's start with the slides, and the big question everybody has certainly is why the demise of TPP? And I think this slide is going to sum it up. If I were to go to your computer where TPP is loaded, find the C drive, find the GHIN folder, and open it up, there's 3 folders here, and guess which one is TPP? It's the one labeled 2004. So in terms of programming, it's absolutely prehistoric. In 2004, 2005, it was the industry leader, probably the best pairings program available in the country. And since then, it's been lapped by several different competitors, including Golf Genius. And so it was just time to go. Also, the USGA has wanted to get out of the software business for years. They wanted to go exclusively with web-based products, and this is a step in that direction. That's why we've weaned 400 plus clubs off the GHP software on computers over the last 2 seasons. So this is just a progression in that step to move away from software. Our best estimate right now on when the rest of the GHIN products deploy is late 2018. That's what they're telling us. They've given us mixed signals over the last few months as to what is staying, what is going, but at this point in time, I can confirm that eClubhouse is going to go away. We'll get one last season out of it. GHIN is not going to replace it. If you read ahead and you saw no billing, that doesn't mean NCGA is not going to bill you. It's just that GHIN has always done our billing for us, the invoices that you receive, and they've indicated to us that that's not going to go forward, so we've had to scramble to find some alternatives that are going to work in the long run. And this isn't the first postponement of the release of platforms that we've experienced in recent years. And to be honest with you, we've had to take the matter into our own hands in some regards and go, well, we don't know if GHIN is going to deliver, what the finished product is going to look like. We need to explore some options ourselves. And so our people have invested a lot of money in a platform called Member Planet. We showed some of the details this Sunday at a club rep day for regular member clubs. It's here at Poppy Hill. So we're looking for different interfaces, different features that your club can utilize. Among other things, it would replace eClubhouse. It would become our billing solution. So all these sorts of things are going on. When we go back to GHIN making the big decision, though, they knew they needed a new tournament product. Their options were write their own, completely outsource it, or partner with someone who had a product. So they scanned the industry at that time to see who was out there, who might be interested in talking to them, and ultimately they came up with Golf Genius. Now, if you go to the Golf Genius website, there's a place that shows all the employees, and I just want to show you this to show that they are a large company. You have a lot of people like this. Certainly there's going to be some admin people, there's going to be some accounting people, things like that. But if you look at it very closely, there's lots and lots of programming engineers, much more so than GHIN has had. And these little decals, you can't really see them very clearly, but every one of those is a PGA professional. So they worked at a golf course. It was their job to run tournaments for their membership. And there's more than 20 that are on the staff. Now, a lot of those are in sales positions, but the bottom line is when we dealt with GHIN, in many cases, there would be a miscommunication, something lost in translation from the golfers to the programmers. Here, Golf Genius has a sounding board of 20 plus PGA professionals that worked at clubs combined for centuries in terms of number of years, and so they have a great sounding board. Simultaneously, while all this is going on, is also something called the Allied Golf Association Initiative that was spearheaded by the USGA. And just to go over this very briefly, as recently as a month ago, there are more than 100 golf associations in the country that were authorized to issue handicaps, authorized to issue course ratings. At one point in California, there were 11 or 12 total, 11 that could do ratings, I think 12 that could do handicaps. Now there's only 59 nationally and only 2 in California. Northern California Golf Association and Southern Cal are the only ones authorized to issue ratings and handicaps. So starting January 1st, we're responsible for all the course ratings in Northern Cal, both men and women. That's good news in terms of golf courses, in that good news in the long run, in that you only need to place one phone call now if you have a situation that arises. So last year we had some serious flooding. We had golf courses that had some holes go underwater, had to come up with a makeshift temporary setup, needed a temporary rating. It's very frustrating getting back to these people saying, well, here's your men's rating for your temporary setup, and now you need to phone this number in order to get the women's ratings. That's not going to occur anymore. It's one phone call for any renovations, combo tees that you're putting in, family tees that you're installing. Will be full service in terms of the men's and women's side. We've been able to recruit many of the women raters that have been serving Northern California admirably for the last few decades in terms of issuing women's ratings. A lot of them are going to come over and work for us. So we hope that will be a smooth transition. We know that there will be some men-only ratings this year, some women-only ratings this year, but the goal is to make them all co-ed in the long run. So if the women just rated your golf course in the last 3 years and the NCGA was due to rate it for the men this year, we'll probably do a men-only, and then 6 years from now and forevermore, it'll be co-ed rating. So you're only visited by a rating team once every several years instead of men's team, women's team. Which is going to be great for you in terms of scorecard production and things of that nature. The other impact is that all handicaps in Northern California will soon be issued by the NCGA. So the PWGA and WGANC, all their club numbers are going to have to migrate away from their coding to our coding, and that's supposed to occur in the next few weeks. And then simultaneously, the WGANC was orchestrating the migration of all the 9-hole women's services into 18-hole services. We've been a little bit on the outside looking in, been copied on some of the communications on this particular topic, but I believe that is going to occur perhaps by the February 1st revision, that the migration of the 9-hole handicaps to 18 would occur, and then we need to migrate all the PWGA and WGANC clubs to the NCGA. And that's been one of the complications, is all these club number moves. Now, the way your club numbers are set up right now, there's a 2-digit association number, as much as a 4-digit club number and a 2-digit service or roster number. So you could be 53 and 63 identified the NCGA. There could be a club number of 100, and then the number 1 roster, the number 3 roster, 5, etc. PWGA is Association 28, WGANC 31. All those are going to have to move here, so we're having to pinpoint exactly what their club number is going to become as they move away from their current coding to ours. It also has an impact on a lot of our existing clubs, this change in numbering. Right now we have scenarios perhaps at a public golf course where there is a men's club or co-ed club that plays out of there, and then maybe a separate senior organization, senior group that plays there too. They're completely independent of the men. They have their own status with the NCGA as an associate club. And then maybe there's a third. There's a YOC group or perhaps a SIRS group that's piggybacking on the same computer. Well, we just came to realize very recently that the platform that GHIN is moving to will not be able to read service numbers. It'll be blind to that, as is USGA TM. And so in this scenario that we have right here, where we have 3 clubs piggybacking on one computer, if it couldn't read the service, it's looking at it as one big club rather than 3 independent. And obviously these 3 independent groups want to keep their independence. They want their own account set up to run their own tournaments. And again, that's causing some of the complications in why GHIN isn't processing and setting up these accounts at the pace that we would want to see them do so. So we're trying to sort that out. We'll get it completed as quick as we can. Anything else going on? Well, yeah, also complete rewriting of the rules of golf in early March. Those are going to be announced. They'll go into place in 2019. And then we're only 23 months away from the launch of a world handicap system. So again, a lot of things going on. So let's talk about the status of TPP. It still works, but it doesn't talk to GHIN anymore, meaning you can't dial up to retrieve your current roster with current handicaps. And at the end of the tournament, you can't send the scores into GHIN. Just a little more than a week ago, they cut off that capability. Now, a lot of you don't want to hear this, but you can continue to use TPP, just recognizing it's lacking in those 2 areas. Some might say that's a deal breaker, but depends on your perspective. You could go in and go to the normal point where you say, I want to bring in a roster with current handicaps. It prompts you saying, hey, you did this a couple of weeks ago. Do you want that list or do you want a new one? You could say, yeah, give me that one I did a couple of weeks ago. That's your roster frozen in time with handicaps frozen in time. But you could bring them in, pull all the people over indicating who's playing in this particular tournament, line them up under here under tournament player list management. And as you scroll through, you'll see the handicap frozen in time. And in many cases, a lot of handicaps aren't going to change from January 15th to February 1st. But if you were armed with a printout of the February 1st handicaps in alpha order, you could just go through and go, oops, this player changed a tenth or two, manually change that number, and you're in business. We've also have a way where you can download a roster directly from GHP Online Club. That's the website that you're using to perform all your roster transactions on, score corrections for your membership. There's a way to run a roster report, get all the names, current handicaps, bring them over into TPP. We're going to explain that, and we're going to demonstrate that tomorrow to you. One thing to note is you don't want to bring your entire club over. What we're actually going to do is eliminate the middleman. Once you get the roster formatted properly with the current handicaps, you want to delete the people who are not playing in this particular tournament. You want to just import them directly and say, these are my tournament players. So we'll show you how you can do that. But I got to be honest with you, in some cases for small clubs, this manual method is going to be faster. So we have some directions to import it. Some clubs I'm sure are going to go, well, it takes me a little bit longer, but I like doing it this high-tech way. And they'll do it that way rather than just making the little notation over here that someone's index changed a tenth or two. As far as score posting, well, you have 2 options. One, you could just say, hey, for the next tournament or 2 in early February, just ask the players to post the scores themselves, indicate whether you want the T or not. And then a couple days later, you can go into GHP Online Club. You can run a scores posted report and audit those postings to make sure that everybody posted their score with the T, posted it properly. Probably especially want to make sure that the people who won that tournament, those who cashed, did post it properly. So that's one option. The other is to use the rapid score entry feature within GHP Online Club. It's under scores here, rapid score entry, and basically you have an opportunity to preset all the details for the rounds you're about to post. So you could say, here's the date, you do want the T or not, you can indicate the course and the T's, and then you have the option of either entering the first few letters of the last name of a golfer, a member within your club, and then That will generate a list of who qualifies. A little search will be done. Bring their name in, their score, the next player's name, score, or you could do it via GHIN numbers. So for a tournament with about 40 people, it'll probably take you 5 to 8 minutes or so to post those scores. This method versus pushing the button. And to be honest with you, I think you have to look at that way in terms of the added amount of time in the short term it takes you to get the current roster with current handicaps and post. I think you need to look at it not versus last year going, well, this took me a total of 8 minutes longer than it would have last year. I think you have to compare it with the reality of right now and say, well, this is how long it'd take me to set up my tournament. If I don't utilize TPP, though, just dotting the scorecards and writing in the names alone is going to take me a lot longer. So I think that's the way you have to look at it. It is a little bit of an inconvenience, but it's better than having to do everything from hand. As far as Golf Genius is concerned, again, I'm learning the program. I highly recommend you go to the Golf Genius knowledge base. We provided a link in the sign-up materials, or you can just Google it. Just put in Golf Genius knowledge base. It has some outstanding training videos, some articles that are typically narrated, and they are animated, so they show the process of clicking on a particular menu and pulling it down and selecting an operation. There's outstanding help throughout the program. Golf Genius does about 3 training seminars a week all year long, and we'll be able to provide you with some credentials since the accounts are not set up yet, where you can go in and supplement some of your training and hear it directly from the horse's mouth in terms of Golf Genius employees walking you through some of the steps that I'm going to be showing you today, but perhaps doing it in more detail. This is the knowledge base. If I were to scroll down, this is where there was a video in terms of an introduction. There's all these different topics. You can type in any subject. Honestly, that's how we're going to be doing troubleshooting for you for the next several weeks as we start learning the program in great detail. You're going to bring up a question. If we don't know the answer that second, we're going to go to the knowledge base. We're going to go to help. We're going to find the topic. And I'm guessing we're going to find 90% of our answers there, meaning you would be able to find 90% of the answers there in some of their help materials. For example, suppose we were setting up a golf course. Over to the right, you can't see if we can see it right here right now, but there's the help button. You click on that, it's going to bring up help pertaining to the page that you were on. And if the question was, how do I add a new golf course, you click on it and you get a detailed response. So in a very short time, I've developed very much of a comfort level knowing that quality help is always at my fingertips, either via the knowledge base, via the videos, or via the help feature that's available throughout the program. So that's very comforting. Again, that's what we're going to be using to serve you early on. A couple of misconceptions out there. Some people went and explored the Golf Genius website and just were navigating around and saw something about payments and, hey, are we being charged for this? There's no charge whatsoever for the USGA TM club version of the Golf Genius platform. It's included with your NCGA dues, just like TPP was, so no charge whatsoever. There is a premium version, which does have a cost associated with it. I'm going to review that in a second, but rest assured there is no cost. And basically, they were charged with making sure that they had a club version that did everything that GHIN did, and certainly from what I've seen, they've delivered. A lot of people have also said, okay, when are you going to send me the software? There is no software. This is web-based, or more specifically cloud-based. So there is no software now, never will be, nothing to load. There are no Mac issues, no Windows version issues. For some of you, they used TPP for years. If you had your old faithful laptop that lasted you 6, 7, 8 years and finally it gave up the ghost, you went and bought a new laptop and it had Windows 8, well, you're in for a surprise because Windows 8 was basically allergic to TPP and there was a problem operating it. You can operate USGA TM from a PC, a laptop, a tablet. We had someone at last year's GHIN meeting in November brag that they set up an entire event using their iPhone. So really, you have access anywhere, anytime. All you need is an internet connection and you can get in. The advantages of cloud-based, well, among other things, you're always using the latest version. So when this new quick event feature debuts in late February, again, there's nothing to load on your side when you access your account. It's just additional features are there. Multiple club officials can access it. So you can set up permissions for several different people, several different levels of, or 2 different levels of permissions for several people within your club. So a pro shop staff probably going to be included. And at a public golf course or an associate club, you know, maybe it's one person who does all the tournaments, but it's an opportunity to bring some other people in. Maybe you start identifying who your successor is going to be. You start showing them the ropes. We've also had circumstances where we hear, I'm the one who does all the tournaments, but next week we have a big tournament. I'm going to be on the East Coast. So you had to bring somebody up to speed that could at least enter the scores to get your results, to post the scores. You can do that more readily with a cloud-based platform than before. The other great thing is that we can access your account, your events, your tournaments for troubleshooting purposes too. So you call us, you're stuck, we can go and we can go, back here under Teams, you needed to take this step, or you need to activate this feature, and you would have gotten what you wanted. So it's going to allow us very much hands-on ability to do that. I remember with TPP back in 2004, 2005, when it debuted, we thought it was amazing that if a club was really stuck and we couldn't help them over the phone, that they could export that tournament to their desktop, attach it to an email, send it to us, and we could open it up and we could find the spot, fix it, and send it back, or see where the problem was and describe it exactly to them. And we thought that was just fantastic. Well, this takes it to a far greater, far higher level. Disadvantage of web-based, well, it can be slower. If you have a large club, when you downloaded your roster with current handicaps, all those people in those handicaps were there. So when you add players, the roster was deposited in the available players side, the left side of that one particular screen, and you move the people over to the right that were playing in this particular tournament. Well, you could scroll from the top of the alphabet to the bottom of the alphabet, no problem, pretty quickly. You could navigate around. That's not going to occur with a cloud-based program. There's going to be times where you have to wait for multiple pages of your roster to load. It's not as easy to navigate from the front of the alphabet to the end. Suppose you have 2-man teams and you want to enter the players in the order of the teams, meaning I put the first player in and then their teammate, I put the second player in, then their teammate. So when you form teams, you could say do it by entry order. I want 1 and 2 together, 3 and 4 together, 5 and 6. It's more difficult to navigate now. They've got a workaround for that where you can put in the first few letters of someone's names and navigate, and we'll show you some of that today and tomorrow. But it can be a little bit slower, and if you lack internet access at the golf course, you're in big trouble. With TPP, you only talk to GHIN twice, once in advance to get the roster and the current handicap, and once after the fact to post the scores. And all you needed was power at the golf course. You set up a scoring table, the scorecards are coming in, and you just enter the scores, and everything is great. Well, you're going to need internet access to get to your account to enter your scores with the USGA TM program. So that could be an issue. Now, in my case, I've got a company phone, and that phone has the ability to create a hotspot. And so if there wasn't Wi-Fi available and I'm at a golf course, I can create a hotspot and I'm in business. I got to imagine that there are some within your club that would be in the same boat. So if you have an issue with accessing Wi-Fi, accessing your account, you could grab someone in your club and have them activate their hotspot and problem solved. And I've been assured by Golf Genius that for those people in that position who go, well, my plan, I don't want to have a lot of overages, that this uses, there's very little data going back and forth, and that it's you're using less than you would if you spent 5 minutes in Facebook or something like that. So somebody shouldn't have concerns from that standpoint. Now, there is a premium version that's available. It's $2,500 per year, and that actually represents a $600 discount because you are an NCGA member, because you're an association that subscribes to GHIN. There are other parts of the country that do not, and if a golf course there was interested in the top-of-the-line product that Golf Genius has, they'd be paying $3,100 a year. The primary differences come down to a few different features. One is the premium version has online registration and commerce, so it can handle credit card transactions, etc. Two, there's an app that includes real-time scoring. At the GHIN conferences that we've attended the last couple of years, there's been another meeting that piggybacked it that had a tournament. Golf Genius gave someone in every group their app, and at the end of each hole, that person was asked to enter the hole score for all 4 players in that group, which then allowed everyone to log in and check the current status of the scores. One guy in my group 2 years ago was playing well, was checking it religiously, got to the last 2 holes, saw that he had a lead, and played those last 2 holes pretty conservatively to preserve his win. Another guy birdied a pretty tough hole and was checking all day long to see whether that skin might be holding up. The app can also be used in lieu of a tablet, in lieu of a PC on the golf course. You had some last-minute changes. The app could actually be used to say, I want to substitute this player for that player. You could use it for other purposes in lieu of a laptop or whatever. Customizable websites. So if your golf course does a lot of outside events and you really want to enhance the experience, you can customize a lot of the websites. Enhance sponsor recognition, that kind of goes hand in hand. The portal, which we're going to be talking about, you'd be able to perhaps include the charity or the corporation, the outside event, their logos, their banners into your tournament and really dress up that tournament for all the participants. Trip management, that's what Golf Genius started off as, a company that developed some sort of trip management software. So a pro takes 40 members to Bandon Dunes or elsewhere. It's 1 round a day for 6 days, and every day there's a $20 buy-in for this and that. It can keep track of all the expenses, the skins, the winnings, the meals, things of that nature. With the premium version, it'll integrate with other club systems like your club website, like tee time systems, like cart and GPS systems. And starting in just, I actually believe it started today, there's also texting capabilities within the premium product. So you can text the entire field saying, we got a frost delay, the shotgun has been delayed until 9 a.m., or text everybody a little bit before, reminding them to check in at such and such a point, etc. So if you're interested in the premium version, let us know. We'll put you in contact with the right people. There are 12 clubs in Northern California that have already enrolled in premium, and that should be comforting for you on one standpoint. They did this prior to any knowledge that this was the direction that GHIN was going. So they had certain needs, certain wants in terms of a tournament solution. They scanned the marketplace and said, this is a product that will allow us to offer the best tournaments that we possibly can. And you're going to be getting the foundation of that product in the USGA TM club version. So that's very good. So the 12 clubs, some are usual suspects like a Pebble Beach, like a Silverado. There's a couple others that surprised me a little bit, but that just tells me they probably have a lot of outside events. And again, they want to enhance the experience of those outside events because it's an important part of their business. So soon, we don't know when, you'll be issued an activation email. It's going to be sent to the individual that received the announcement for these webinars. You'll immediately have an opportunity to log in and then send an invitation to all the other people within the club that you want to be able to have access to serve as an administrator within the program. So if the person we sent the email to isn't quite the right person for running tournaments, again, you can go in and immediately invite the right person to come in and be an administrator and then wash your hands of it. And for a particular event or league, you can set up a secondary admin person, an event or league manager that would have access to, wouldn't have access to the customer center, but would have access to a particular event. So that might be that handoff. I do all the work, but I'm not going to be here on the day of the tournament, so I'm going to give this person permissions just to be able to enter the scores, figure out the skins, post the scores afterwards. So here is the customer center. So when you go to www.golfgenius.com and you log in, this is the landing point. It automatically defaults to the events, leagues area. Mine says trips because they provided the NCGA with a premium version. This is the site that we're going to use to run all of our tournaments. You actually don't utilize the customer center a whole lot. It's just a means to create an event or clone an event. Clone an event is one of the most exciting features. That's why I'm thinking for some of you just want something simple. With TPP, you could say copy a list of players from another tournament, but then you had to go through all the gyrations of saying we have 2-man teams, and then we're going to have 3 flights, and we want shotgun start, and we want to do things this way, that way. Here, once you have an event established, you can just go in and clone it, and that means it's going to clone all those selections that you made. The actual format, not necessarily the golfers, because 1 year later, maybe some of the golfers change, but if you're running your big member guest, maybe it's a round robin or something like that, and everything went great, and it's just been very successful year after year. You set it up for this year, and in the future, you'll be able to dial right into that. You'll be able to clone that particular event and reproduce it with the 5 rounds that you're going to have in a round robin competition and how you want the flights established and the different starting times and the different shotgun starting holes and things like that. You would actually clone the event itself and then adjust the players. Another thing I like when I come here is I see the tournament that I was last working on. So if I started working on a tournament a couple of days before I come in, I can just find it in one click, be on my way. And down here, there's a number of folders that you get to organize your event. So this is the active NCGA one. So we have our own championships. We have USGA qualifiers. We have weekend tour. We have junior tour, things of that nature. You set it up in any way that makes sense to you, that makes you easier for you to organize your particular tournament. So if I was at a private club, I probably have a men's folder, a women's folder, a mixed folder, a senior folder, a junior folder, and an outside events. All you want to do is organize it in a way where it's easy for you to find a particular event, in large part because you just may want to clone it. You may want to reproduce that setup next time. So you just want to be able to find it, organize it in any way that you want. At a smaller associate club, you might set up individual events, team events, things of that nature. Now, the first time you come into the customer center, that's the only time you're going to be spending a lot of time in this area, and that's where you are able to set global defaults. You're able to tell the program in general, this is how we tend to run our tournaments. Anything you can do to streamline the process of setting up an event in tournaments you want to take advantage of. So we're going to go to customer settings and look at a few of the features. One would be managers. This is where you're able to go in and, again, give administrative rights to different people or give rights only to a particular event. If we go to default settings for leagues and events, we have a number of different tabs. The general setting could be things as simple as time zone. Yes, that in general you tend to have divisions and flights and teams, which we'll talk about more. The handle that you want to use, how you want the name organized, last name first, first name first, however you want to do it. I'm always going to recommend last name first because within their GHIN records, people tend to have their name set up in a more formal manner. So if you're looking for Bob and Bill, there's a very good chance they're under R for Robert and W for William. So if you were searching for them under Bob or Bill, you're probably not going to find them. But these are just global defaults. You can overrule or override these defaults for any particular event. But again, if you can streamline the process, that's a good thing. The second tab is handicap settings, that you're only using 18-hole handicaps. When you do ask to pull in handicaps, do you want the current handicap index, which certainly we would advise. You can pull in trend, or you can pull in a low handicap of the last 3 months, last 6 months, whatever you're choosing. So you would be able to tell the program right up front, right now, that unless I tell you different later, when I ask for a handicap, this is what I'm looking for. You get to tell it whether you want to post scores or not. You get to tell it whether you're going to use section 3-5 for adjustments for different tees or not. Within TPP, we had the ability to spin off the low rating, spin off the high rating, or if 3 or more tees were being employed, you could designate which tee you want to spin off. I always recommended, why don't you just spin off the set of tees that most of the people are playing from. That means most of your field, they're not going to be confused about the handicap that they've been issued. Well, they have a feature that just says, adjust the fewest players. That's how I want to spin off, and that's how I want Section 3-5 applied. So that's wonderful. How you round your handicap allowances, the recommendation is a 0.5 rounds up. You can overrule that, etc. The next tab would be rounds and scheduling. You tell it, in general, we tend to play foursomes. So for any tournament that you set up, if you don't change this default setting, it's going to assume you're playing in fours. Just made your job a little bit easier. I like this, having to do with A, B, C, D. Oftentimes these are social events like scrambles. Maybe maybe not quite as much hardcore competition as, again, social. One of the features is optimized for most diversity based on previous round pairings. So there's a memory, and it goes and checks other pairings that you've had and tries to split it up where people are playing with different people instead of the same people all the time. Some of the other factors would be how you want the teams listed on reports, scorecards, things of that nature. Tournaments and scoring. Overall, this is the tiebreaker that we want, the USGA methodology. It can do season-long events, season-long points, season-long money winning. So if it was points, you could say, hey, you didn't play particularly well this event, you didn't cash, but you get a point for participation, and that'll go into the award at the end of the year for the most points. You get to tell it you want to post by total score or hole by hole. Certainly, we're going to recommend hole by hole in order to get skins and ESC applied. You can set up your Stableford. A net par is worth 2. Is a double bogey and worse 0? Or once you start doing worse than double bogey, do you start going minus like the PGA Tour event? Things of that nature. We set up the default league and event member portal. This is one of the features I'm most excited about. Every single event sets up its own website, and you can steer your entrance to this website to, among other things, if it's a week out, they can go look at the pairings. After the tournament is over, they can go look at the results. They can look at stats or analytics showing how the golf course played. You can post photos here. You can post all sorts of things. So to me, this is a huge feature. And as I think back to the club, I grew up in the state of Washington. I think we would use this as a focal point for our tournament program. So a week out, the pairings are done. Instead of just sending an email to everybody going and attaching the pairings and having it open it up, I would send them a link to this portal, drive traffic here, and then they can look up their starting time, who they're playing with. After the event is over, I'd post the results here, send them the link again, or remind them that the link will bring you right back, and now they can see the actual hole-by-hole scores of everyone if they want to confirm that how the skins worked out. Gee, I thought I won a skin there. Who tied me on the hole? And some of the analytics. Now, obviously, at some clubs, you want to drive people to your website, not this, but this is one of the features that I'm most excited about, that every single event gets a website of its own. So this is just basically setting up a default website, how you want it to look. Now, if you had an outside event, you want to completely redo it. Again, you want to include the sponsor's logo and a lot of their details, maybe different background photo for all that, and really jazz it up so that you're making the experience better for that outside group who played in your tournament. Another thing is course details. Now, the bad news is we cannot capture all the courses and tees that you've set up within TPP and pull them over to USGA TM. At some point in time, they're expecting to be able to retrieve course ratings, updates to ratings, perhaps even hole-by-hole yardages and par, but that is not available yet. Golf Genius is waiting for the okay from the USGA to do that. So unfortunately, you're going to have to set up your golf courses and tees again here, but this is where you do it. Now, since this is a live program that encompasses the entire NCGA tournament program, we're going to be utilizing dozens of courses this year, so our rules and comp people are already hard at work establishing those courses right now. When you do set up the course, again, you're going to have to hand enter the ratings for right now, but you have some global settings for the golf course, and then you have some individual settings for a particular set of tees. So some of the global settings would be things like green depth, pace of play parameters, shotgun priority, things like that. So let's look at it briefly. Here's where we could say the green depth, and why do we use this? Because we want to do hole location sheets for some of our tournaments, and the depth is not going to change. These depths would be applied to every tee that you establish. It's a global setting. Hole labels doesn't make a lot of sense, but if this was Poppy Ridge, we have 3 9s. And maybe on Zinfandel, we'd want to call 1 1Z, and on Merlot, 1M and 2M. And that way, if you had a shotgun start, you're labeling the starting hole in a little different manner that makes it a little bit clearer. Pace of play information can be included, and then you can include that on the scorecard telling them what time they're expected to complete each hole. Down below, shotgun priority. TPP had this, and I think it was underutilized. I don't know why people don't use this, because it's a great feature, but you ask yourself, if I had a large shotgun here and I had 19 teams, which would be the one hole that I'd double up on? And in most cases, you probably say hole number 1. If I had 20 groups, which would be the 2 holes I'd double up on, well, 10 might be next, so I might call number 1 the number 1 rank, number 10 the opposite, number 2. Poppy Hills just recently flipped 9, so what traditionally had been number 1 is now hole number 10, but that might be the top priority. And then if you know Poppy Hills, the 8th tee is fairly close to the clubhouse. Maybe that got a high ranking. And maybe the low end of the ranking might be the par 3s or the golf course, the holes that are furthest away from the clubhouse. So you just rank the holes 1 through 18, and now you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you have a shotgun tournament at your course. If you have 25 groups, you've already established the terms, and the program knows which 7 holes it wants to put 2 groups, and all the rest will have 1 based upon this shotgun priority ranking. Another feature, one of the reasons we flipped 9s here at Poppy was the 9th green to the 10th tee was a long distance, and you had a snack bar and restrooms in between, so we always had to factor in several minutes between the time they walked off number 9 and made their way to 10 and completed 10, and this allows you to put that in for pace of play too. You can also set up default tees. So if you've got one guy, Bob, and Bob always plays the gold tees, and that's fine with us. Within a global setting for Bob, you could say always put him on the gold tees, and then you wouldn't have to worry about it, be taken care of. Certainly you're going to put in the yardage, the pars, and the stroke holes. That's pretty straightforward. Some of the other customer settings that they have, one has to do with the scorecard library. They had 19 scorecards that I saw in there that you can choose from, or you can use as a starting point and then modify to suit your needs in terms of logos or other features or size of print. There are custom fields like that you can utilize, phone numbers, shirt sizes, things like that, if it's a big member guest where there's a T prize. And then backgrounds, banners, and logos. The backgrounds can be displayed on the TV leaderboard or the portal, the website. Banners can be displayed on both of those, plus any emails that you send out, because the program includes the ability to send emails either to your entire club or just to those people playing in this event. And then logos, of course, can go on all your materials, cart signs, scorecards, things of that nature. So we want to set that up in advance. We also have a master roster and then a season management, including season points, things like that. And then if you, all year, you're entering hole-by-hole scores, there's a feature that allows you to do a stroke hole handicap analysis that can confirm that the stroke holes are ordered properly, the handicap stroke holes are ordered properly. You can utilize those scores. The master roster is very important. Think of this as your roster residing on GHIN right this moment. So everybody that's there. Now, as we set this up, if we're talking about a private club, we're going to say this one account wants to be able to access, in effect, the men's roster, the women's 18-hole roster, and the women's 9-hole roster. You want to be able to pull them into your master roster to make it easy for you to add them to an event. So that is what the master roster is, your ability to call up and get what is listed at GHIN right this second in terms of your roster. Here's the ability down here to send emails to everyone, or if I were within an event, to send an email just to the people who signed up. Here's where you'd be able to establish default tees for players and just say, Bob always plays gold, so just know that in advance, and then I don't have to remember to do that when I'm doing a tournament. And as we're going to see later, you can upload master roster from a spreadsheet. Now, you would never do that here on the customer center side. We would only do that in the actual event. But if you have an outside event, I've never worked in golf course operations, but I imagine they send you something saying, here's the field. They might even tell you, these are the people that we want to play together, and we want to make sure that our boss gets to tee off on number 1 in terms of the shotgun start. You just put that in a spreadsheet form, and now you're able to import that spreadsheet with all those details, and now you're off and running. You establish your field, and you can use those team numbers to establish your teams. You can use those starting holes that they designated, and you just made your life real easy. So we'll do a live demonstration tomorrow. We'll kind of show you how that works today. It's very intuitive, so it works really well. So once you've set up your defaults, ironically, you spend very little time in the Customer Manager. You just go there to clone an event or create a new one. The formative work is performed in the Manager site. So I would click on Create an Event or Clone an Event, and now I get in there. Now, before we go a little further, do have to talk about some of the different terms. The terminology is a little bit different in TM, and these are not quite as important as the next page, but let's go over them. Blind would be, I've got 4-person teams. It's going to be best 2 net out of 4 like we do in our zone in our Associate Club Championship. Unfortunately, only 47 people signed up. So I have 11 teams of 4, and I have 1 team of 3. So we need a blind, somebody that we're going to draw, someone else in the field whose hole-by-hole scores will contribute to the best 2 net out of 4 score for this team that only has 3 players. We have handle, already discussed that. That's how the name is arranged, last first or first last. Portal is the website that's created for each and every event that you established. Linked tournament would be like I have a big member guest and it's over 3 days, and each 9 is a different form of play. I'm really going to create 6 tournaments of 9 holes, and I want those all linked together to determine the final standings, the scoring for the overall tournament. That's different than a 6-6-6 tournament. It can do 6-6-6, holes 1 through 6 we're playing a scramble, and 7 through 12 we're doing alternate shot, and 13 through 18 we're doing a 4-ball, better ball. That's different, but linked would be where you're linking multiple 9s into a multi-day event. User scored tournament would be a side event, maybe like a long drive on a particular hole or closest to pin on a particular hole. It's not something that the tournament management program can score. Somebody has to hand enter who the winner was, and then that can be reflected in the results and the prize money and everything that you are distributing. Here are the big terms, though, and for years you thought you were running tournaments. It turns out we're running events as far as USGA TM is concerned. These events include a round or rounds of golf, and then these round or rounds of golf include a tournament or tournaments. So that's the progression: events, rounds, tournaments. The way that I've come to remember it is they're in alphabetical order. So once I made that connection, there's never been any doubt in my mind what the progression is. Another one that we need to get clear on is divisions and flights. Anytime you set up a tournament and you have players in it, it defaults to at least a division of players, but you may want to flight them within. So we're going to show you a tournament here, which is going to be a better ball. It's going to be by flight, so we're going to have a low handicap flight, a high handicap flight, and then we're going to have a side event. Everyone's involved in skins. So if those skins happen to be an optional buy-in, I would activate divisions and say, well, I have my first division, which are all the players are going to form the 4-ball teams, but then I have an optional buy-in for skins. That's going to be a separate division, and I'm going to choose which players paid up and are involved in that competition and go from there. So divisions and flights are important. And then we have a master roster, event roster, and round roster. Oftentimes the event roster and round roster are identical. Everyone in the event is playing in the round, in the tournament. Sometimes maybe not in team match. NCGA team match. Your master roster would be your roster at GHIN right now. Maybe that's 400 players. 25 of them have indicated they want to participate in team match throughout the season. And then for that particular round, you've chosen 12 of those 25. So most of the time, these two are the same, but there can be a distinction. Here is the progression that TPP uses right now, and I'm going to review it pretty much one last time and then ask you to strike it from your memory. But if we remember the menu, it goes across on the upper left, across to the right. First, we would create the tournament, indicate it's men or women or mixed, and name the tournament and how many rounds and what the date was, and we'd select the T for both genders. The next step, or the next area of the calendar, was course. If it was a course we never played, we'd have to set up the course, the hole-by-hole yardages, etc. Then we would add players. Then we might form teams out of those players. Then we might form flights out of those players or those teams. The next step would be to create pairings. Then we might want to print scorecards for the rounds of golf or some other reports. And then after they're done playing, we're going to enter scores. And again, we might run some other reports in terms of the results. So that was the progression that we followed. That's all we've ever known. So on some degree, it makes sense to us. That doesn't mean that that progression was perfect. And the example I'll give is, suppose you had a tournament where some of the people are playing white, some are playing gold tees. When you created your tournament, you weren't able to designate for men that some of the players are playing white, some are playing gold. You could only identify one. So you had to wait until you added players and then perhaps went back. If you were smart, you waited until you formed teams and then you went back. And if you're really smart, you waited until you formed flights and then you went back to reassign tees, brought up the field by flight, and said this highest handicap flight is actually playing gold. So as much as this is what we're used to, that doesn't mean that this is the only way or the best progression. In the example I just gave, we might have had to go all the way to step 5 and then backtrack to step 2 in order to account for a different set of tees, a second set of tees that was in play. TM's progression is create event and then perhaps edit those global default settings that you created in terms of events. So perhaps say, you know, in this case, this doesn't follow exactly how we set up our defaults. I need to tweak a couple of things. Then perhaps tweak the portal, not use the standard portal, the standard website setting that you have. Then we would add players. Then we would add rounds. Then we create teams and perhaps flights. Then we create pairings, including setting the course in T. We're doing that at a much different point that we did in TPP. Then we get around to adding the tournaments. Adding tournaments is coming really late, and I'm just coming to think of adding tournaments meaning when do you actually tell it how you're going to score the event? When do you actually tell it the format? In the first several steps, maybe we're telling, yes, we're playing foursomes, and yes, we're doing teams, and yes, we want flights, and we're doing all that, but we still haven't told it, is it best 2 of 4? Is it a scramble? You know, what exactly is it? So add tournaments here in TM is very, very late. This is one of the things I really like. You do a pre-play audit to make sure that you've set up everything properly. You can do a handicap analysis to make sure that the number of strokes that are appearing on the scorecard have been computed correctly, that it is taking into account that you said for this event we're using 90% of handicaps and we have some different tees that are in play, so we want to make sure section 3-5 is applied right. Then you have the ability to enter some random scores to test your leaderboard. You know, you're under a lot of pressure on the day of a tournament. You want to make sure everything runs smoothly. So here's an opportunity days ahead of the event when you got your pairing set up. Just say, let's just enter some fake scores, some bogus scores, just to make sure that it looks like I've set up the scoring format properly, that the leaderboard is working. And again, I think this is a wonderful idea. Then we might print some materials, including starters lists, things like that, and the scorecards. After the golfers have played, we're going to enter those scorecards. We're going to double check the leaderboards again, make sure they look right. Then we're going to sign off that the round has been completed, verify the results, and then publish them where they can be viewed on the portal, or you can publish them elsewhere. So a different format. Now, when I put some of them side by side, again, we're adding course much later But I'm already starting to come around going, hey, maybe that makes sense. Again, this didn't work perfect. Some cases I might go from step 5 back to step 2. So what difference does it make which course and tees I'm playing until we get to the point where we're actually going to be setting up the tournament and telling you the format and how the handicaps are being calculated. So I'm already coming around to that. The other thing is add tournaments comes real late. You may have thought that you set up the tournament real early in TPP, but in reality, you didn't tell it how to do the scoring until you got way down here and said enter scores. So this may seem like it is vastly different, the progression in TM, that you actually add the tournaments really late in the process. This may seem vastly different than TPP, but in reality, it wasn't until the scorecards were being turned in that you went into TPP and said, I want to enter hole-by-hole scores, and we're going best 2 net of 4 and things like that. So this is not that much different from that standpoint. And again, I'm going to say you need to forget all about this, wipe it from your memory, and focus on this. I've actually printed a lot of this out, and I have it on my bulletin board, and as I am working on a tournament, I'm refreshing my memory, going, okay, I added the players. What's the next step? Okay, I have to tell it the date of the round. And then what's the next step after that? Well, I got to do teams and flights, things like until it becomes second nature, I have these reminders to myself, the progression. And I really think your success in learning this new program and transitioning to this program is based on how quickly you can learn and accept the step-by-step ordering that the TM program actually uses. Again, to try to start thinking in terms of how the program thinks, its logic, its order, and going from step to step. So let's create an event, and right off the bat, it's going to tell you, take me to the wizard. At the GHIN meeting in 2018, they had a set of pilot associations that had been testing the program thoroughly in the previous months, and a gentleman from the Midwest was on that panel, and he got up there and he said, I don't want any stinking wizard. I want to learn the program from the beginning. I want to learn how intuitive it is, and I don't need any help. I don't need any holding of my hands through the first steps. And he kind of got lost. After he named the tournament, he would have come here. He wasn't sure, where do I proceed? It didn't seem intuitive to him, but what is intuitive? All we've known is TPP, and we know the order of TPP. And in his mind, that had become intuitive because it was so ingrained in him. But again, nothing says the order that things were done in TPP was correct. So I like to activate the wizard. Certainly ask you that in your first few tournaments you set it up. And it's just going to walk your hands through, hold your hands through the first few steps of the program to make sure you're doing it right. So the first step is, once I've activated it, it's saying, hey, you need to add your golfers. How do you want to do that? Do you have a spreadsheet? Are you just going to enter them individually, or are you going to import them from the master roster or GHIN? And in most cases, that's what you're going to want to do. So we're going to import golfers from the master roster. Again, this is your roster or rosters that are back at GHIN. So if we come here in the master roster, we have a few ways of doing it. If you're from a small club, you're probably going to want to say you want to select from the master roster. And basically, you're going to be presented with your roster in alphabetical order, and you simply place a check mark next to the name of everyone who's in this event. When you're done, you scroll through page at a time. And again, if it's a small club, you don't have too many pages. If it's a large club, you have to wait. I might be able to pull this menu down and get a little further in the alphabet, and then I'm actually, the program is going to have to load another page. I'm going to have to wait for it. And again, this is critical if you are specifically trying to enter players in order, so that when you form teams, you can say, form my teams by the order that I entered these players. But in normal circumstances for small clubs, you put in checks, indicate, import, and boom, those players are in the tournament. For a very large club, you probably want to use the quick search in master roster feature, where you enter a minimum of 3 letters, but at least 3 letters. The more letters you do, the more it narrows the search. But as SCOT was entered here, I pulled up a bunch of different Scotts, and someone named Robert Scott. That's who I wanted. I highlighted it. I clicked add member. And then if his partner was somebody near the beginning of the alphabet, starts with the letter B, I start entering his last name, find that person, highlight it, click add player. Another feature I like is to be determined. So within TPP, when you are entering people in order because that's how you wanted the teams formed, you always had a problem with someone who said, well, I know I'm going to play, the guy I was supposed to play with backed out. I need to find another partner, but you know, I'm in. Make sure that you include me. And I would always recommend, well, just put a dummy name in there to fill a slot, so that when you do form teams, this player will be put with that dummy player, and then when you find out who his partner is, you can just substitute the two, and everything is great. Well, here you can do it a little bit more formally by just saying add a player to be determined. So those are our two features within the master report on how you draw people in, either bringing up the list, putting in check marks, great for small clubs, or the quick search, which is great for large clubs. We can also upload a roster from a spreadsheet. So again, if this were an outside event and they gave you a spreadsheet of who's playing, I could just import that. The program is intuitive. It's going to be looking for some certain headers like last name, first name. If it doesn't recognize the name of the header, it's going to say, hey, I found a match for last name, first name. Not sure what you mean by this, what this header is. So here it is, and now you tell me which that goes with. Where is my match in terms of its vocabulary, its language that the program uses. So you could go to GHP Online Club, bring up a club roster, export it ultimately into an Excel spreadsheet, and then pull those people in. Those people you're pulling in are people that you're entering into the tournament. You don't want to pull in your whole club, just those who are entering, and then in one little swoosh you've got all those people in. So here I had, I went and exported that report into an Excel spreadsheet. Here are my headers, and I was just able to say import this in, and knew what last name meant, it knew what first name meant, gender, GHIN number. Actually, it may not know what HI is, and so a display saying, I'm not quite sure I know what you mean by that. What is HI? And on the right-hand side, you'd have a number of fields, and you'd say, I want to line it up with index. And now it imported all that. Your field is done. The more I utilize this, the more I'm thinking I would use this import feature. Maybe I do my formative work in an Excel spreadsheet for the most part in terms of arranging my field, setting them up by team, maybe entering team numbers, maybe some other factors, and then I import that in and streamline the process and get my tournament done much quicker than either putting check marks in for names or moving from the beginning of the alphabet to the late part of the alphabet in order to retain an order to make teams. Then I'm going to want to access GHIN to update handicap indexes, especially if you're importing from a spreadsheet, especially from an outside group. And, you know, it depends on what I set up in the global setting and the defaults. I can bring in current, that's what we'd always recommend, but you could bring in trend, you could bring in low handicap. Now, some of you have a handicap system on the side where you are only keeping track of tournament scores from your own club, and you have a calculation on the side. Well, you always had to hand enter those values into TPP as well. You'd have to do the same here unless you import the people from a spreadsheet that's going to show your T handicap that you have for a player. The only thing I would caution you is it's going to treat it like a handicap index, meaning it's going to apply equitable stroke control as if that was the golfer's real index, and that could create some little mishaps. If their real course handicap would have been 21 and you're making them play to a T handicap that works out to a 19, and the guy got an 8 on a hole, he should be able to keep that 8 and utilize it when he posts. If you have your T handicap in there, it's going to say, oh, 19s are only allowed 7. I got to take 1 away from your score before I post. So you do have to be careful there, but these are the options available to you. Next step is I'm going to indicate the date. So I just clicked on January 26th in this case. So now you can see the wizard is telling me, okay, I did add golfers. I did take care of calendar. Event profile, to edit that profile would be the next step. If all of my global default settings are correct, I can just bypass this and say, no, I'm fine, everything there applied. Maybe I got it set up for divisions and flights and teams, but in this particular event, I'm not going to activate any divisions. I will do flights, but not divisions. I just go through and say, no, I need to change that event setting. I don't want flights. And now I'm not going to be pestered at any points down the road in terms of divisions. It knows that divisions do not apply to this event. Next, I'm going to select perhaps the golf course that's going to be used. And then I have an opportunity to edit that event portal instead of just the default portal. I want to jazz it up because of this outside event or whatever. So again, it's gonna hold your hands through the first 5 steps, and then when you're done with the event wizard, we're presented with this page, and we kind of have to figure out where do we want to go next. Well, according to the order that I have on the document that I have hanging on my bulletin board, after I've entered the players and added the rounds, next step would be create teams and flights. So I have these 5 different categories at the top of the event menu in terms of categories of actions I want to take. You know, which one do you think creating flights and teams would be under? Well, pretty obvious that would be under golfers. So I come down here. Here is my field. If I decide to do this manually, I would say I want to manage the lists and flights, but that's showing all the players and they're just individuals right now. This is where I go in and I'd say I want to create them manually. It's 2 on a team. And literally, here would be my list, and I click on a name, I click on a second name, they're put over here, and I say save, and that was my first team. And then I click on a player, save, that's another team. I could have gone back and said, no, I want to do it by the order that I entered the players, so I want to automatically create by entry number. And again, the first player I put in would be the teammate of the second player, 3 and 4 would be teammates, etc. So pretty painless in terms of creating teams. I can also do it by a custom field, so that might be something that I pull in from a spreadsheet for an outside event that's giving you some sort of direction in terms of how they want those foursomes put together. You can use code numbers there and do that, or when you import it, you could just call it team ID. It's going to understand what that is and utilize that as a custom field. Flights, I want to automatically fill them. It's going to be the combined course handicaps of the teams. And if I have a tie, if the dividing point between the first flight and the second flight, I have people with the same handicap index, I'm going to break that tie by the combined differential. Whichever team has the slightly lower combined differential, they go in the first flight. The higher one goes into the second flight. I've got 2 flights here. I found this refreshing that normally when I do teams, one of the later steps where I actually determine the tees that everyone's playing from. But here, when you do flights, it's great. It's refreshing. It asks you right then, because oftentimes you might have 4 flights, and it's the highest handicap flight that's going to play the gold tees, everyone else playing white, and I'd be able to designate that right there. So my flights would be created. There's a little round checklist that's been created, and I haven't been checked off on getting anything yet, but this is going to remind me after creating teams and flights, I need to create pairings. So I'm going to create new pairings. I'm going to go in and say this is the division of all golfers. Again, I'm not using divisions. It defaults to at least 1 division of all the players in the field. And I'm going to tell it, yeah, why don't you go ahead and do those pairings for me? And I want to make sure that that I retain those teams, that they play together, because it's going to be a better ball, and I want them playing with each other. There's also a feature here where there's a tab that says keep together. So I can make sure that even though people are on different teams, their pairings are going to be very near each other. Maybe they're driving together. Could be a junior tournament, kids of different ages or whatever. And you just want to make sure that for the sake of their driver that they are paired together, or you can spread them apart. I have mortal enemies, and we don't want one playing behind the other because there may be incidents in terms of hitting into the group, so let's just keep them spread apart. So here is where it's actually come up with my pairings, and you can do all sorts of things, all sorts of menus available to do things right here. So I could swap players. Now I wouldn't want to, because again, these 2 are teammates, these 2 are teammates, but technically I could go in and simply click on Ray right here and click on Bobby, and they'd be exchanged. I could swap pairs. So if I clicked on Ray, it's going to encompass Ray and Samuel, and then click on Mike here. Those 2 would be swapped for these 2. I could swap pairings. I could click on Greg right here. It would highlight all 4 players. Click on the second group, and now the 6th group moves up to the 2nd slot. Over here is where I do a lot of things, so either setting up a shotgun or setting up tee times. And here's where I could actually set some of the tees. Now, because this was a flighted event, I pretty much already told it. But in most cases, if I just did teams, this is where I'm actually going to tell it. If I just did teams, this is where I'm actually going to tell it which tees we're playing. So first, let's set tee time. I'd come in here and I would select all. In my global default for our tournaments, I said we use 10-minute starting time intervals. That's what you're going to want to do if you're a private club. You get to dictate the starting times, the intervals, so go ahead and put that in. It'll enter that value there. If you're an associate club that travels from course to course, each course may be a little bit different, so you may not be able to use that global default setting quite as effectively. But I would select all here. All these groups would be highlighted. Maybe I'd put in and say we're going to start at 9 a.m. We got the 10-minute starting time intervals. Go. And I would see that there are my starting times. You do, again, select all or just select some of the groups because you might have waves. You might have a morning group going off, and so you want to envelop the first half of the field and say these are the ones impacted. They're going to start at 8 o'clock, and then you get the second half of the field and say they're going to be going at 1. And then I could go ahead and set up the course. Again, since this was flights, I already got to do that, but this is where I could designate the tees. You certainly can set up not only default settings for individual players, but default settings for your tournaments in general, and just say, hey, just default that we play our tournaments from white. I used to be a member of Pacific Grove Golf Club, and almost every single event was played from white. There was one that we played from blue. So setting up the default tee as white globally would have been great, and just that one tournament where we played blue, the club championship for the championship flight, they would be able to go in and say change that to blue. So I could select all players, and I could select a different tee just to add a little spice to this tournament. I went to my name, and I said instead of playing the Poppy Hills 2 Poppy tees, set me up for 4 so we could see that feature of 3-5 different tees being employed and see how that works. So now that my pairings are done and I've set my course and tees, the next thing is I'm finally going to get around to adding a tournament. Now you can see it's showing me I've done some progress now. Made some progress. Pairings have been created. The course and tee is set up. But now I want to go to tournaments. That's under rounds. And looks a little bit complicated. Here's the add user scored tournament where you can say we also have a closest to pin or long drive or something. But I'm going to go in and say I want to add a tournament. And I can set up several tournaments. In this case, I'm setting up a team event. I'm going to use all the scores from all the players. It's not an alternate shot. The payouts are going to go to the teams. It is stroke play. It's going to be this team of 2 versus their flight. So I've got 2 flights. You're just competing. There isn't a low net for the entire field. You're just competing against your own flight. It's the best ball on each hole. It's 18 holes. It is a net event. Handicaps are going to be awarded at 90%. And here's the tie-breaking method that we want to employ. If I go back, we also have the ability to set up a purse where we can say the total purse is $400 and first place is going to be $75 per teammate, $150 total, and then $100 and whatever. And you can program that in, and you can tell it again how you want ties broken. And when you enter your hole-by-hole scores, it'll compute your results, including the money or the prize that each person won. You can set up points that you can utilize for season-long points. This was a one-day tournament. First place is worth 10. If it was a 2-day tournament, maybe you'd say first place is 20, and you're going to do points down to this place, so you could set up all that. They have some advanced options, including handicaps. And you won't see this, but that's where I went in and I said, for this event, it's a better ball. If the teammates are more than 8 strokes apart in terms of course handicaps after the 90% has been applied, they need to face another 10% reduction in their course handicaps, which is the USGA recommendation. So I have the ability to do all that. So there's my first tournament set up. Now I go in and say I got a second tournament. It's skins, and everybody's in. It's player versus field. It's not skins by flight. It's player versus field. You use your own ball on each hole. Do I have are we going to carry over skins? If nobody claimed it on 1 and 2, do they carry over? To win a skin, must it be a score of par or birdie or better? Or if you're the only one to make a bogey and everyone else blew up, you still win? Do you have to validate that skin by performing well on the next hole? Otherwise, you forfeit it and it goes back into the pot. What handicaps are we using? Well, this is net skins, and we're going to use 100% of the handicap. This isn't a 4 ball where we use 90%, a better ball where we use 90%. Of course, handicaps, you get 100%. Now, if I had gross nets, gross skins, I would go back and I'd have to set up another tournament, and I would have all the same findings, except I would say it's gross. And so, again, we have 1 round of golf, but we could have 3 tournaments going on here. The better ball, the gross skins, and the net skins. It's very simple to set up, very painless. The next step then, after I've added my tournament, is to do a pre-play audit, and I'm going to focus my attention on these 2 menu items, the pre-play audit of round and the handicap analysis. If I activate the pre-play audit and go in, it's just going to run some diagnostics and make sure it looks like you've set things up, that we don't have a team that doesn't have a teammate. If I had swapped players in pairings and separated the teams, it'd be telling me, hey, you got a little bit of issue here that isn't quite working right. So hopefully the diagnostics are going to come back passed on all accounts. Again, you're under a lot of pressure when you're running a tournament. It's nice to do this days in advance and go, okay, it looks like it's set up right. If I then went back and activated the handicap analysis, this is pretty sweet right here. In my case, I had a lot going on, but it's saying my index was 5.7. I am playing the 4 poppy tees with a slope of 140. That works out to a course handicap of 7. The format that we're playing calls for 90% of the handicap. That's 6-3, which rounds down to 6. My partner and I had more than an 8-stroke gap, and you indicated under the advanced settings that if that was the case, both partners had to forfeit another 10%. So my 6 became 5.4, which rounded to 5. And then the last step was it recognized I'm playing the 4 poppy tees while everyone else is playing 2 poppy. The difference in the course rating was 4, and so my 5 wound up being a 9. So what a great feature. It gives you peace of mind that the handicaps, the strokes, the dots that are appearing on the scorecard are appropriate, and that when you go in and do your scoring, enter the hole-by-hole scores and want to get your results, that it is computing everything properly. Or if you have a naysayer who, I don't think you did my handicap right, you would be able to demonstrate to them the step-by-step process that wound up with the number of dots that are appearing on their scorecard. The next step would be to enter some random scores. We just want to make sure that the leaderboard is working. We don't want any hang-ups, any surprises on the day of the tournament. So it's just going to enter some random scores. And when I say random, the first player might be a 40 handicap, and it's giving them a gross score of 80, a net score of 40. All we're trying to do is test the mechanism of scorekeeping and the leaderboard to make sure it's working right. So I'm just going to enter some random scores, and then it's going to say, do you want to test the leaderboard? And then I'd be able to look at some reports, just acting as though those were real scores, and see that the skins are working on a gross level, the skins are working on a net level, and the better ball was working. Now, once my next step then is probably printing scorecards or other reports. So this is in advance of the tournament. Maybe this is a few days out, and you said, well, let me do a pairing sheet that includes an alpha breakdown. And now let me post that where it's available on the portal. And now I can send an email to the people and say, hey, the starting times are available on the portal on the website. Go in and you can self-service. You can see what those are. But here's where I might do scorecards. And this looks a little bit intimidating because I have all these tabs that I have to deal with, but it's not as bad as it looks. I have selected all. I've indicated I do want to print scorecards for the field. It knows the starting times. It knows the groups and everything. Under format, that would be such simple things as I want one scorecard per sheet, or 2, that it is 8.5 by 11 stock that I'm using, that it is landscape as opposed to portrait, things of that nature. Handicap stroking, it's asking how do you want the dots displayed, things of that nature, so it's pretty straightforward. Additional info, logos, again, how do you want to set this up, fonts and colors. If it is a shotgun and you do have access to a colored printer, do we want to use bright yellow to highlight their starting hole? Again, do I want to include a watermark, logos, things of that nature? And then I can do a preview where it's going to show me what the first 5 scorecards are going to look like. Now, our rules and comp people are not overly impressed with the scorecards that they've seen, what they look like. Same with some of the reports. Part of Golf Genius's philosophy, which they state, is they think we're transitioning away from reports in the long run, and within a few years there will be no printed reports. There'll be no printed scorecards, that you'll access everything on your iPhone and you use your iPhone to post your hole-by-hole scores. So I don't know if those two things go hand in hand, but there is a number of scorecards that they've already established. You can go in and say, this one's close to the way I want it. Let me just tweak it up a little bit, use a different font, use some italics, use some bold, put in a watermark, do some other things, arrange it, include some additional information, get it exactly the way you want. Here's how this scorecard came out. This will not be unlike some of the scorecards from our championships this year. It's displaying 2 sets of tees because, again, this is the one that I'm in, and I'm playing 4 poppy. Everyone else is playing 2 poppy. Here's the breakdown of the handicap. So these first 2 guys are teammates. They only had to have the 90% applied once. They're within 8 strokes of each other, so they didn't have to go any further. Me and my partner, we had a lot of gyrations. Again, 90% was applied, then saw that we were too far apart, docked me another 10%, and then added the 4-stroke difference based upon the difference in course ratings. So, that's what the scorecards look like. Again, there's a library that you can find some of the different scorecard formats that they've established. You can tweak them, save them. Not quite as well organized as TPP, where you could establish some favorites, favorite reports, or favorite scorecards that you could draw on all the time. But again, this would be a nice rainy day project. If you had nothing to do, just spend half an hour or something working on some scorecards and getting them to look exactly how you want them. And then make sure you name it, so you're always going to recognize the name of that scorecard. And every time you want to run scorecards, you get the one designed exactly how you want. The other thing we do is run some reports. So an alpha sheet, a T sheet, a combined alpha and T sheet, cart signs, again, scorecards, leaderboards, all sorts of different reports available to you. And if I go to the report composer, I would actually find that there are dozens and dozens of pre-selected formats, pre-selected reports that are available to you at your fingerprints and fingertips in all sorts of categories, like fancy score boards, again, using a color plotter printer, just making a dazzling score board, to some elaborate cart signs, things like that. Again, just using watermarks and logos to get it exactly how you want. After I've printed my materials, here's an example of one of the reports, just a very straightforward, here are the starting times and the handicaps that you're going to actually play with. If someone wanted confirmation, in this case I said, show the handicap index so people see that we were using the current index, and then show the number of strokes that are going to align with the dots that appear on the scorecard. At this point, then, the round is completed and the golfers are coming in, and now they're going to be, you're going to want to post the scores so that TM can determine your better ball winners, can determine your skins, net skins winners, etc. So first and foremost, we want to make sure that we remove those random scores that had been entered when we wanted to test the leaderboard to make sure it's right. And I didn't even bring this up. Well, you'll see it tomorrow, but it is so straightforward in terms of how you enter the hole-by-hole scores. Not much different than TPP. You're going to bring up a pairing group. They're going to be in this order, and you're just going to enter the hole-by-hole scores, 5, 4, 5, 6, 3, 5, etc. As I start entering the second player, then the better ball is going to start kicking in. If the hole score of this golfer on the third hole was lower than this one, I'm going to find that the gross team score and the net team score have changed. And then I'm going to move on to the next player. So you can enter the hole by holes very, very quickly, just like you could in TPP. And then at this point, earlier I had mentioned that as soon as the pairings were done, I wanted to place it on the portal. I'm just going to go through some steps that after all the scores are in, I want to run, I'm not going to call it diagnostics, but I just want to make sure before I publish the results that everything looks in order, that there are no hole-by-hole scores that were missing, no team scores missing, so I have an opportunity to view the leaderboard and then ultimately complete the round, verify the results, publish the results. And again, I want to say now that the results are completed, the tournament is completed, I want to be able to show these results on the portal. So again, next day I could send an email to everybody saying, here's the link to the portal again, go in and you can see all the results in detail. You can see the photos of all the winners or the social event, and you've completed your tournament offering. So that's pretty much the presentation, the global view of the big picture view of the program. You can see that it can do just about anything that TPP did and more, especially in terms of, I really like some of the features in terms of prize money distribution. TPP could do that, but prize money distribution, season-long competitions, season-long tallying of either prize money or points. We just went through a very basic tournament, but wanted to give you an overall look at it. Tomorrow, again, we'll be going live, and we'll be showing the step-by-step process in more detail and some of the menu options available to you. It's still going to be kind of a vanilla tournament. I think we're going to go best 2 net out of 4. I am going to import a spreadsheet, acting as though it was an outside event that's coming to a golf course where they're giving me the names of the players that are in the field, who wants to be paired with who, show you how that mechanism works. We're going to show you specifically how you can go ahead and download a roster from GHP, the step-by-step process to still pull it into TPP to get you by the next couple of weeks. Things like that. And then the overall plan is we're going to develop a web page on our site that's going to have some of these recordings of part 1 and part 2, whichever one we deem best, if there is a best one. We're going to have the slides available, although I got to tell you that the Golf Genius knowledge base is going to have far superior articles and videos and everything than any of the slides, any of the crude slides that I did. So I highly recommend that you go there, that you start utilizing help. I highly recommend that you take advantage of some of the training webinars that they offer live on a regular basis. So the website will show you some of the sign-on specs that you would need in order to be able to indicate that you want to watch one of their webinars. You can go into the knowledge base, though, without having an account set up. Just Google search Golf Genius knowledge base. It'll bring you right there, and then you can start playing with a number of the categories. So if this webinar is like the 2 previous of the part 1, a lot of you are going to have a number of questions. Again, we don't know the date yet that the accounts are going to be activated, so please don't ask us that. But if you want to start asking us about some of the features, here's what my club does, how would you envision us setting this up, or can it do this and that, have at it either through emails. We're still catching up on all of them that we got last week. You can drop questions in this GoToWebinar platform that we've been using, so we'll check those and we'll try to get back to you as quickly as we can. I didn't do so well on part 2 last week. I made a left when I should have made a right at one point, so I'm going to be spending a lot of time studying to make sure that tomorrow's live presentation goes a little bit better. So it may take us a couple of days to get back in terms of all the emails. But you know, each time I come in here, I'm becoming more comfortable with it. I'm seeing the power of the program. Again, I'm comforted in the fact that a dozen golf courses in Northern California selected Golf Genius on their own and selected the premium feature. That tells me that as they looked at all the available products, they felt that this was best, and you're getting the foundation of that premium program. You're getting the basics of it, all but just a few features. So you're getting a very powerful program, and yet at the same time, you can break it down and make it very simple in terms of cloning previous tournaments that you ran, where all of your selections, all the format is recreated, and all you have to do is indicate that it's a slightly different subset of players than the last time, but everything else is going to be identical. So that's going to conclude today's webinar. We're did about 20 minutes better than we did on the first two. That's some of the preamble that you missed on. But again, I've already gained a comfort level in terms of the quality of the help that's available. And I highly recommend that you go to the knowledge base and start looking up and dialing in some of the features that you're looking for in the program, and getting that comfort that, yes, this program is going to do that. So that will conclude today's. We look forward to many of you tuning in tomorrow, where we'll go ahead and do that live demonstration. Thank you.